Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Tracking the Tropics. I'm Wes Hohenstein in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hurricane Zeta has made landfall in southeast Louisiana as a Category 2 hurricane with 110-mile-per-hour winds. That happened about 3 hours ago, and tonight the hurricane continues to hit Louisiana and Mississippi hard. The state has seen 5 storms make landfall just this season alone. Before we get to the very latest on Zeta, look at this video just in from around New Orleans. This is from WGNO's Scott Pile, just in and around the New Orleans area. This is where some of the worst of the weather was hitting as the eye wall of Hurricane Zeta was moving through. We have confirmed wind gusts on the ground of over 100 miles per hour. And as you can see, they're getting a small taste of that right there with sideways rain, making it tough really to control the camera. But thank you to Scott for that picture. So that's what our friends in southeast Louisiana are dealing with tonight. This is yet another storm to have made landfall. Let me start you off tonight with some interesting trivia. We have gone through a lot of history so far this hurricane season, but let's add this one to the list. This is the strongest hurricane to make landfall in the United States this late in the season since Halloween of 1899. Obviously, we didn't have named storms back then, but this is the strongest late season storm since Halloween 1899. That storm also had 110-mile-per-hour winds hitting South Carolina. So let's do some nowcasting. You know, a lot of the times the majority of our efforts are spent in forecasting, but listen, it's happening right now. There's New Orleans. This little outline right there, that's Lake Pontchartrain. That's a huge lake that often causes problems when a hurricane comes and they get too much rain or they have storm surge. So now you can kind of see it's broken up a bit, but the eye is now northeast of Lake Pontchartrain, pretty much right over Slidell. And remember, the worst of the weather when the eye of a hurricane comes inland is in the outer eye wall. And you can see it's a large one where that intense red band on the radar is. That's where the heaviest of the rain is. That's also where the strongest winds are going to be. And we still have sustained winds around 100 miles per hour. That's what's happening in Louisiana. You can see the rain is spreading all across Louisiana, parts of Mississippi. In the outer rain bands that are hitting closer to Mobile and the Florida Panhandle of Pensacola, you can see we have some active tornado warnings. So that's yet another danger as a storm comes inland. This storm is going to be completely different than anything we've seen in a while because this is going to be one of the fastest moving storms eventually over the coming hours. And it's going to be out of here off the East Coast in probably less than 24 hours. We'll talk about that in a second. But again, doing some nowcasting. These are live wind gusts. This is the latest from the Hurricane Center up here. Winds are now 100 miles per hour. That's the 8 o'clock update. And look how fast it's moving, north-northeast at 25 miles per hour. Sometime in the next few hours, it's going to pick up even more speed. And tomorrow morning, it's going to be moving between 40 and 50 miles per hour. That a completely different storm than some of the slow movers we've had over the last few years that have moved 2, 3, and 4 miles per hour. That is good news because a fast-moving storm does not present flooding dangers. Yes, there's going to be rain and a lot of other problems, but flooding will not be one of their problems. Look at that wind gust in Slidell, where we told you the eye really is right now, 68 mile per hour. Shell Beach, which I think they got the wind gust and then the data went dead. They had a 101 mile per hour wind gust. That's a little bit offshore. But an incredibly amount of strong wind, even out toward Biloxi, Mississippi. Some of these rain bands producing 51 mile per hour wind gusts. Mobile, 47. So even though they're miles and miles from the eye, those rain bands not only producing damaging wind, but also some tornadoes. Here's some pictures that we're just now starting to get in. This from the city of Kenner, which is a suburb of New Orleans. And what I see here is a power pole that used to be upright. Not only is it bent over, and you know, if that were just the case, it wouldn't be that impressive, but look closely with me because it actually got chopped in half, kind of. Half of it's hanging there, the other half. So this used to be a really long pole. It got snapped in half. and then the power lines are kind of holding it up from falling all the way to the ground. This is the kind of thing that results in power outages. However, you can still see that some of the light is on. Got another picture to show you. This was sent by the city of New Orleans. This was as the eye itself was passing over New Orleans. Obviously, you maybe recognize the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. There's the basketball arena in the background. This is where the Saints play, Final Fours, Super Bowls. But look, you see some brightness in the sky. So as the eye was passing over, they actually got a little break from the heinous weather, and they saw a little bit of sunshine passing through. Let's go live now. This is in Gray, Louisiana. This is another suburb of New Orleans. You can see obviously dreary, wet conditions, and it's gotten a little darker, but just to the west in Baton Rouge, you can see some slightly lighter coloring in the sky. They had a little bit of sunshine peeking through, so just 30, 45 minutes down the road, they had completely different weather. So as we come on to the air with you tonight, the 8 o'clock update from the National Hurricane Center, 100-mile-per-hour winds with gusts up to 130, and it's moving north-northeast at 25 miles per hour. Again, this is going to continue to pick up speed as it moves across to the southeast part of the United States. Let's take a break from analyzing what's happening. Let's talk about what's going on with, are we going to go to Louisiana now, or are we going to? All right, so let's actually do a couple more graphics here before we pick up some other things. I want to talk about the forecast path. First, here is the forecast path from the National Hurricane Center. We expect the system, obviously, now that it's over land, to continue to weaken. By early Thursday morning, it's going to be somewhere in the state of Alabama. Then by Thursday afternoon, it's going to be in Virginia, the leftover center of what is now Hurricane Zeta. And then by early Friday morning, it's out to sea. That's an incredibly fast-moving storm. So between early Thursday morning and Thursday afternoon, it's going to be moving 40 to 50 miles per hour. So that's a pretty amazing feat for a tropical system. Now, something else you might notice, look at the actual cone of uncertainty. Because the storm is expected to move that fast, the cone of uncertainty, the National Hurricane Center, is able to make it a lot more narrow. It's kind of like, if I'm here in the studio and I take out, let's just say, a baseball, and if I roll it really slowly across the floor here, I mean, I'm not sure if it's going to wind up over here or wind up over here because it's so moving so slowly, it could go anywhere at once. Let's say I take the same ball and I throw it almost like a bowling ball as fast as I could. It's going to be pretty obvious where it's going to go. It's going to go in whatever path I throw it to. Same situation, more or less, with a fast-moving storm. It's going to be pretty obvious where it's going to go. If it's a slow mover, the path is going to be a little bit wider. And here's one of the reasons why this storm is going to be moving so fast. There is a really strong cold front and a strong area of low pressure helping to usher it along, really picking it up and zooming it out to sea. You can see it on the water vapor satellite. On this water vapor satellite, orange and yellow, that's really, really dry, and in this case, cold air. You can see the gray and the purples and the blues. That's really, really moist air. So you have what is Hurricane Zeta butting up right against all this dry, cold air. This is actually a very strong push of dry, cold air. That's what's going to help get this system out of here. And you can see it. Normally I'm not talking about Texas temperatures on a hurricane show, but look tonight. They've got freezing temperatures in parts of Texas a few hundred miles away from where a Category 2 hurricane has just hit. Think about that. That is a pretty amazing meteorological feat. 32 in Amarillo, Texas, 75 degrees right now in New Orleans, where they are dealing with a Category 2 hurricane. So we're all experiencing, and this is going to impact a lot of the country, this cold air, a pretty amazing scientific feat here. So here's what it looks like on the surface map. There is Hurricane Zeta. We've got a lot of warm, humid air in the southeast part of the country, but there's a front with an upper area of low pressure. Behind it, some seriously cold air. That cold air, that dry cold air, that upper level disturbance, that is in control of most of the atmosphere. That is going to push everything out of its way as fast as possible, including the hurricane, including any warm air that some of us might be experiencing. So that's what is about to happen. Let's talk about the forecast, and then I want to talk about the history of what's happening this year and what's happening now that we have Hurricane Zeta inland. This is Futurecast as we head into tonight. This is going to show us how fast this system is moving. From southeast Louisiana, it's going to move into Mississippi very quickly in the next couple of hours, still bringing rain to parts of Alabama. By early Thursday morning, 3 a.m., it's going to be over Montgomery, Alabama. As we get into sunrise Thursday morning, the center is going to be over the mountains of North Carolina, which, by the way, has a tropical storm warning. By lunchtime, the center is going to be in Virginia. And then, as I mentioned, not long after that, the storm system is going to be out to sea in less than 24 hours. Think about it. Obviously, if you have to fly an airplane, you're going to go a lot faster. Think about if you have to drive from New Orleans to, let's say, somewhere up in Connecticut. That's going to take you a long time. You got to stop for brakes. You got to do the speed limit. This storm is going to do that in less than 24 hours. That's how fast it's going to move. And because of that cold air, some of that rain from the tropical system is going to get turned into snow for the northeast. Again, a pretty amazing season we're living through, a pretty amazing meteorological event happening, unfortunately, right now. Like I said, we have lived through quite a season. Melissa Lefevre here in Raleigh is going to tell you, remind you, everything that's happened so far up to this season.
Our historic 2020 Atlantic hurricane season continues, and Zeta is now the 11th tropical system to make landfall in the United States this year. The list includes Bertha, Cristobal, Faye, Hannah, Isaias, Laura, Marco, Sally, Beta, Delta, and now Zeta. Now, the old record was 9, and that was set back in 1916. So Zeta's landfall as a hurricane also puts us to 6 landfalling hurricanes this year. That ties 1886 and 1985 for the most in a single season. 5 of those landfalls have been in Louisiana. The list of those landfalling systems includes Cristobal, Laura, Marco, Delta, and now Zeta. Of all 11 landfalling tropical systems, 8 of those have been in the Gulf. They have just been battered this year. And again, now we've got yet another system on the way. Now, 2020 is second only to 2005 when it comes to named storms. We have 27 named storms this year. 28 is the standing record from 2005. Another stat for you, with winds of 110 miles per hour, Zeta is now the strongest hurricane to make landfall in the U.S. this late in the season since the Halloween hurricane of 1899. The season officially runs through November 30th.
Melissa, some good information. We have got a lot of new entries in our history book. Here's some more interesting facts about what's happening right now with Hurricane Zeta. We mentioned how far up to the north the tropical storm warnings are going. Well, here's a look at all of the watches and warnings associated with Hurricane Zeta. Obviously in red down in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and parts of the Florida handle a hurricane warning. Hurricane warnings mean hurricane conditions are imminent, meaning winds over 74 miles per hour. Everything in orange is a tropical storm warning. That extends from Alabama through Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia. There are 10 states impacted by watches and warnings from Hurricane Zeta. So it is a not only fast-moving, powerful Category 2 hurricane, but it is going to hold together and impact a lot of people over the next 24 hours. But fast-moving storms aren't disastrous flooding events. Look at some of the estimated rainfall totals through parts of Mississippi, Alabama, on up into the Carolinas. You know, in past storms this season that have been moving slow, we've been talking about rainfall totals of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 inches. Not this time. Look at some of the rainfall totals. Barely an inch, barely an inch and a half in some places in the southeast. So flooding rain is not something they'll have to worry about. But wind is going to be a problem. A fast-moving storm gets farther inland before it can weaken. So Hurricane Zeta, the 27th named storm of the season, will bring strong winds all the way up through parts of the mid-Atlantic in the next 24 hours. And I'm talking wind gusts over 40 miles per hour. So just to remind everybody what 27 named storms looks like, Zeta is now checked off the list. And if we do get that 28th storm, it'll take us into some territory where we've never been before. Melissa mentioned that in 2005, we did have 28 named storms, but we never had Zeta that year, another Greek letter, because the 28th storm was added after the fact, after the season was over in 2005, through some post-analysis from the National Hurricane Center. So if we do indeed get another named storm, tropical storm, Hurricane Zeta, it will be the first time ever that we have had to use that name in a season, because in 2005, we never got there because we stopped at Zeta. And wouldn't you know it, there is something else out there that we're keeping an eye on, that the National Hurricane Center says has a small chance of developing. So we've backed out, looking at the big picture. Here's the Gulf of Mexico. The first few frames, you can see Zeta moving up just off screen. The Caribbean, there's a little thunderstorm activity out in the open waters of the Atlantic that absolutely shows no signs of organization. But this little yellow shading in the Western Caribbean, if you look closely, there's really not even a whole lot of cloud cover or thunderstorm activity associated with it right now. So there is a 0% chance of something developing in the next 2 days. However, forecast models have shown us that a developing area of low pressure over the next 5 days gives it a 20% chance of something developing. So back to the list, we very well might have Zeta or possibly a depression to talk about in the coming days and weeks. Remember, the season goes for another week and month, not till the end of November. So we have plenty of time to add another name to the list. But again, right now, no imminent danger other than what's going on with Hurricane Zeta. And I want to finish up with this. As we kind of take a look back, big picture of where we are in the season. Remember, it started back on June 1st. We actually had activity before that. The season peaked as we look at tropical activity throughout the year on September 10th. The season ends on November 30th. Well, we are obviously on the downside of this graph that shows us tropical activity over the years. We are, again, in the last week of October. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, there is a dramatic fall off in activity over the years. But the activity that we're seeing right now, the average amount of activity, is very similar to what we see at the beginning of August, which we all think about. That's usually a pretty busy time. So the end of October has become a very busy time, very similar to what we normally see in the early part of October. Over the years, we occasionally get storms in November. But because cold fronts, one like we're seeing moving through parts of the United States right now, those cold fronts tend to cool the waters, cool the land, and deflect any tropical systems that start to form. Typically, as you get into the late part of the season, the tropical systems aren't as strong and can be overpowered by things like cold fronts. So as cold fronts become more frequent later in the season, like we're seeing right now, it's harder and harder to get storms to form. It's harder and harder to get storms to hit the United States. So that's why activity continues to decrease as we head toward the latter part of the season. So again, it's just almost 20 minutes past the hour on this Wednesday evening, a special edition of Tracking the Tropics. Our friends in Louisiana have had another hurricane hit them tonight. Hurricane Zeta was a Category 2 storm when it made landfall just after 5 o'clock Eastern time on this Wednesday evening. Heavy rain, winds over 100 miles per hour continue to hit them tonight. This is the 6th storm to impact that state just this year alone. They've had 5 landfalls, but another storm that hit Texas curved around and moved over Louisiana earlier in the season. So a record-setting year for Louisiana and for the United States, as we've now had more than 10 named storms impact the continental United States. This, a record-setting tropical season, and now as we head into the last month of the hurricane season, we're just one storm away from breaking records. So that is going to do it for us tonight. We are thinking about our friends in Louisiana. So for everyone involved in tonight's special edition of Tracking the Tropics, thank you so much for being here with us. Don't forget, hurricane season goes until the end of November. We'll be here tracking the tropics for you. Same place, same time every week.